Hi, this is Rick Lawrence, Executive Director of Vibrant Faith, and I'm here with Fred Oduyoye of Reachable Reconciliation. We're having a little Wednesday conversation again about all things reconciling. And Fred, I thought it'd be good if we started off, if you just went over kind of your umbrella 5R approach to reconciliation, to building reconciliation in groups and in church ministry teams. Could you just give us an overview of that again?
Sure, with the dynamics that go on in um, everybody's space, where they live, where they hang out, where they serve, where their role is on their job. I mean, those spaces can be different, from one context to the next. And so, as you think about reconciliation, you've tried to develop a model that says, hey, let's take a look at it from these 5 R's. Because to be honest, reconciliation isn't possible or doesn't appear to be possible when there is not a previous relationship. And so people are like, well, that doesn't make sense. What am I trying to reconcile if I don't even know the person? And so when we think about the 5 R's, we like to talk about react, reflect, repair, reach, and then relationships, right? And if you take those 5 R's, you lead with reaching, which then enables you to now be able to reconcile, right? And so it's very important that we start off by reaching, which is really the key to building relationships. And that's what the kingdom's all about.
I love what you just said right there at the end. The relationships are about what the kingdom is all about. You say this often too, Fred, even as a filter. Like, are we going to do it this way or that way? What's the kingdom way? The kingdom way is always relationship. I think that alone is a great filter because we often default to non-relational ways of engaging things, right?
Yes.
You and I were talking this morning about this encounter you had on the soccer sidelines over the weekend. Was really a profound but simple story to me about building relationships with people you don't trust. Which what could be more practical right now in this season of our existence in our culture than building relationships with people we don't trust because we've learned to not trust in a much more significant way over this last year. So I thought it'd be great if you could tell that story again, and then let's talk about it.
Sure. I mean, how do you build relationships with someone that doesn't care about you or care for you? And in this particular situation over the weekend, I was coaching a game against kind of a rivalry team. And uh, after the game was over, there was a conversation that took place. Now, understand, this is a coach who has talked poorly about me over and over and over. I mean, he talks about how I'm a bad coach and how I am not friendly with kids, which everybody knows I'm friendly with kids. How I don't know much, and and I have no understanding as to why he's so mean when he talks about me. And quite frankly, Rick, I've seen him in not just that space, but I've seen him in multiple spaces, not just on the soccer field, but off the soccer field, in airports, in the community. He won't even look my way.
Wow.
And so in this particular instance, the game was over. And one of the representatives from the U.S. Soccer Federation, he was asking me some questions. And there were some questions that I didn't quite have the answers to, but I knew that this other coach might have it. And so I saw him nearby and I called his name. Hey, so and so, could you explain, respond to this question for me? And so, the guy from US Soccer asked the question, and this coach started talking. And so, now the key to all this was that I even called the guy's name,
Hmm.
right? Because it's like a recognition, like, wait a minute, are you talking to me? You know, and then I'm inviting him into a space to now respond to something that I know that he has the answer to. And then after that conversation was over, now because you've come into the huddle, you have to make a decision. Do you just turn around and walk away, or do you continue the conversation?
Yeah.
And at that point, he couldn't leave abruptly, so he had to continue the conversation. And it was the first time that we ever had dialogue where I think, you know, based on his gestures and based on his, you know, facial expressions, it was kind of like, huh, this wasn't so bad after all. And this guy's all right. And I'll be honest, even for me, I thought, you do have a heart. You have a heart. You are more kind than you're trying to appear to be.
It almost sounds like you're describing the ways these things get set up. It's almost like people have constructed these walls around themselves because they don't trust each other. And if you can poke through the wall somehow, then you have a chance at something. And it almost sounds like you found something useful that you could talk about that wasn't directly about your relationship. It was something else over here. You kind of found something useful that you could, in a shared way, talk about. So how does that work exactly, Fred? If you're thinking about this on a everyday basis, what is a productive way to think about these kinds of conversations then?
Yeah, I mean, just in this particular situation, you look at the sequence and how it flowed. So the first thing was I acknowledged that he existed, right? You know, you call your name, call you by your name, and I acknowledge that you exist. Like, hey, we may never look at each other. We may have never looked at each other before, but now I want you to know that I know who you are, right? Because I called you by your name. And that surprised you, right? The second thing is I tied into something that we both are passionate about. And I sacrificed the moment to turn it over for you to give valuable input, right, on something that we agree is important. So I'm inviting you into a space to share, right? And then the other is it doesn't feel as difficult because in the space you've got someone neutral. So your first encounter is not talking directly to me, but it's talking to somebody else, but we're all in the same space, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And so, you know, and then once you do those, you know, couple of things, then it's just a matter of learning, you know, how do I sit and listen to how the conversation has taken place to determine what's the next move?
Yeah.
You know, what's the next piece to keep the conversation going so that we can learn?
I love how you walk through that, Fred, and that fact that there's a third person there means that both of you, in a sense, and in this case, mostly, almost completely him, you know that you have to be on good behavior in a sense, because there's a third person there. So he can't treat you dismissively without coming off embarrassed that he did that in front of a third person. So in a way, you created a safer space for the conversation to happen by having that third person who is neutral there. The other thing I loved about what you just said is that I'm thinking about this Four Loves, the book that C.S. Lewis wrote, and Four Types of Loves. He said friends stand next to each other and they're looking out, where lovers are standing looking at each other.
Yeah.
So I was describing what friendship looks like, and I was thinking about that as you were describing this, that you're two people who have a love for something else over here, and you're looking out towards that and talking about that instead of this.
Right.
Initial breakthrough.
Well, knowing that's good, Rick. And then the other part is just knowing that you value them as an individual. And so I think in the moment I took myself out of it, right?
Yeah.
So I didn't look at him and remind myself of all of, the perceptions that I thought he had about me, and the distance that I joined in keeping myself distant with him in times past.
All of the water under the bridge.
Right. You just naturally take yourself out of it and invite somebody into the space together. And when you do that, when you take yourself out of it, it makes it easier, for God to say, hey, trust in the Lord, right? Don't lean on your understanding. Get some understanding about who they are.
Fred, I think there's one last thing that I think about with your story that just strikes me as very courageous and maybe is a key to everything. You garnered respect onto him and you asked for his input.
That's rich.
But you in a subtle way said, I respect what you have to say.
Yes.
So I'm inviting you in. And I think that really unnerves enemies.
Yeah.
When you do that, you know what I mean? And you did all this naturally because this is the kind of thing you do. You have a lot of practice at doing this. Any last word here as we close off here for someone who wants to get better at this? What would you say is the first baby step they can take to enter into this kind of conversation? What's the first thing they should think about?
Yeah, I think we ended with that on that last sentence is if you can take yourself out of the situation or take any previous history out of the situation and, figure out what's a bridge, an initial, step across the bridge that you guys can meet together on that makes it a safe space or a safe conversation to start, then that's what you do.
That's good. Well, gang, I think you can see just experientially here why entering into these kinds of difficult reconciling relationships, especially in a church setting, it would really help if you had a coach, somebody who could help walk you through a process that gives you pragmatic ways of doing this, like Fred just shared. So that's what Fred does, as it turns out. Fred helps ministry teams, individuals, and larger cohorts to walk through this reconciling process that he's described as the 5 R's process. So we'll give you some more information about how you can contact Fred and get your church with Fred's input and coaching into this situation for you too. So we'll give you some more information about that on the post, and we'll see you again next time.
Thank you.